Hello, Rob Roselli coming to you once again, Clean TV. Today being Tuesday, October 4th, 2016. And tonight we're going to continue the conversation that was started the last couple of programs on the line-by-line breakdown of Revelation 17 and 18. We'll get to that in just a couple of seconds. Again, my website, boxofsunglasses.com. Email info@boxofsunglasses.com, Twitter @RobRoselli. Again, the website is boxofsunglasses.com, all one word, in honor of my favorite movie, and perhaps the most accurate movie in terms of current events and what's going on and what's been going on in this nation. Let's just say for the past 100 years since the inception of the scam Federal Reserve System, which is coming to its mathematical conclusion, which is complete economic collapse in the not too distant future. But we'll get more into that in our line-by-line breakdown of these two chapters of Revelation, which I believe accurately describes the demise of a entity known as Mystery Babylon, which I have no doubt is these very United States. But anyway, again, my 3 books, Pleased to Meet You, okay, which is really a thinly veiled description of the history of the world told through the eyes of Lucifer or Cain from the Garden of Eden, which I believe has manifested in this image of the beast, one Barack Hussein Obama Sobarko Barry Sotaro, the man with multiple places of birth and more names than a Manhattan phone book, okay. And on my homepage on my site, boxofsunglasses.com, I have a Mystery Babylon, we'll call it a Mystery Babylon ebook, and it's on there right now, and that has even more, we'll call it information and background on Mystery Babylon. And as I've said, we've gone through the background of the foundation for what we're going to discuss tonight on the last 2 shows. And those will be up on my YouTube channel at some point. I'm trying to get that organized at this point, but a lot of it happens to focus around this multi-named man of mystery who is at this time in history is occupying the occult land of the United States, or this nation formerly known as the United States of America. As I've stated many times, this is not my country. This Federal Reserve Corporation, with its mercenary army and its psychopathic march to World War III, led by the image of the beast, starting wars everywhere, is not my country, okay? Regardless of what the neocon psychopathic maniacs on Fox News want to have you believe, okay? Fighting wars does not necessarily equal patriotism, as those Madison Avenue imbeciles will have you believe. But anyway, that's not the subject of tonight's show, but you'll find it very interesting, the numerology of abomination, okay, this walking occult symbol that is Barack Hussein Obama, or what I like to call Pharaoh Barry, okay, as he leads this modern manifestation of ancient Egypt, controlled by his high priest handlers, the Rockefeller, Rothschild, etc., high priests of Federal Reserve finance handlers. The parallels are striking between Mystery Babylon USA and ancient Egypt, and unfortunately the result will be the same, okay? The 10 plagues of Egypt and the demise of these Mystery Babylon in Revelation 17 and 18. And it's not something I'm excited about or really want to talk about, but nonetheless, this information must be disseminated, and if I'm wrong, and I hope I am, then so be it. But if I'm right, so anyway, so those links are posted on the homepage, as are my books. The one I just showed you, Pleased to Meet You, in the Un-American Genocidal Complex, okay, which is just a snapshot of the conspiracy. But again, for review, we have our Georgia Guidestones, Elberton, Georgia, brought to us by Robert Christian, or the Rosicrucians. Okay, remember the rose, symbolic of the Egyptian male sun god Osiris, and the cross, symbolic of the female whore goddess. Isis are the model gods and god and goddess of the ancient world. Of course, you know, the Greeks, Babylonians, Sumerians, the Buddhists, okay, even your Norse gods and goddesses, okay, all had parallels to Osiris and Isis. But I like to focus on them because they're the, let's just say, the easiest or the most pronounced to kind of refer to without going into a whole tangent on mythology and who's what and this and that sort of thing. But so the rose plus the cross, the Rosicrucians, Osiris plus Isis, Robert Christian, the son of Osiris and Isis, known as the sun god Horus, which again in ancient Egypt, remember the pharaoh was the represented Horus. Every pharaoh was the son of the sun god Apollo, Osiris, or Nimrod, and the female whore goddess Isis. Okay, and that's important because from there we come to the 18th degree, or 6 plus 6 plus 6 degree of Freemasonry. And remember, Revelation 13:8, it is 603 score and 6 here to calculate or count the number of the beast, and it's a number of a man, which implies a Cain-like entity from the Garden of Eden walking the earth, or a Satan-like entity walking the earth as he is banished from heaven. Okay, so there's a lot going on there with that, just with that alone. But again, not to go off on a tangent, and I have discussed this at length on past shows, so I do not want to go on that tangent right now. But anyway, the point is, you just a quick review of all this, the conglomeration of information that's pointing to the United States as Mystery Babylon. Okay, and again, we'll get to this, you know, in Revelation, especially in 18, when it talks about the cage of every unclean and foul bird. Okay, the only nation that fits the bill is the United States. Okay, it's not Islam. It's not the Catholic Church. It's not Babylon in Iraq. Okay. But anyway, 322, the Skull and Bones, you know, George Bush and John Kerry, both Skull and Bones members, laughing off the conspiracy kooks in the 2004 presidential election. Ha ha ha, the conspiracy kooks, it's all a big joke until you realize the numerical connections made in everywhere, in many places on my website, and a lot of them, again, in the links talking about the walking occult symbol known as Barack Obama, or Barry Obama, or what I like to call Pharaoh Barry. But anyway, and of course, the nexus of Mystery Babylon, a nexus of a lot of the world government / radical environmental movement / genocidal psychopaths that make up the radical environmental movement, the devil worshippers that we've talked about on this show. Not conspiracy theory, Lucifer's publishing company, Lucis Trust, okay, all emanating from this building right here, the Rockefeller founded United Nations, right here in Mystery Babylon, okay. So again, that's the un-American genocidal complex. And with that, let's get right to it, okay. I have gone off, admittedly, on some tangents, building some background from the Old Testament and to some of the language that shows up in these two chapters. And again, I'll start posting that on my site and direct people to my YouTube channel, where it'll have descriptions, and you can go back and to review some of the build up to what we're going to talk about tonight. But let me just, and I've read this on past shows, okay, this is a piece of mail I got from something called the Life Legal Defense Foundation. These are the people that are defending, remember, that exposure of Planned Parenthood, as they're selling baby body parts for money, which is blatantly illegal. I mean, not even illegal, it's reprehensible. It's on a par with if you think about it, with the Nazis in World War II. I mean, everybody's down on the Nazis, but how much better are we selling live baby, ripping, as this letter goes on to say, a live 20-week-old infant had its face ripped off, so the sick bastard that wanted to buy the brain, the wholesale brain, could buy it for $160. Okay, now this has gone on in this nation to the tune of 50 million times since the beginning of the abortion, was so-called legalized and a woman's right to choose. But again, where did this just a slight sliver of review here, just to kind of give the a sense of current events or reality to what we're going to talk about, to help tie this together, to bring the quote real world, align it with what's in the Bible. Okay, a nation founded on Christian principles now considers it a woman's right to basically spit out a 20-week-old baby or older, in the case of Queen Jezebel, or in Pharaoh Barry's case, even a live baby, and murder that baby after it's born, or in Queen Jezebel's case, I don't know if she's gone as far as Pharaoh Barry. That's not to say she wouldn't. I mean, for political expediency, she's probably not. But anyway, I don't want to go off into that right now. But the point is that, let's just take Queen Jezebel, which is Hillary Clinton. Okay, now she partial birth abortion, which basically means, so to avoid any kind of legal complications, with a live human and all that kind of inconvenient stuff, you leave the baby in the birth canal and suck its brains out before it's allowed to exit the birth canal. You collapse its brain or its skull and suck its brains out with a catheter or whatever. So, and again, the genesis of this whole thing was Margaret Sanger, who had an intercontinental love fest going with Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. Okay. And through something called the American Birth Control League, and we went through all this, and that's discussed again in the Un-American Genocidal Complex, the Darwinists, the survival of the fittest crew, okay, the people that put black people in zoos and carnivals as proof of evolution, okay, the progressives, the predecessors of today's liberal progressives, okay, mostly white, Ivy League, banking, academic, elitist, out of which Margaret Sanger came in, her American Birth Control League and Planned Parenthood, and the murder of babies, of the overwhelming percentage of them minority babies. So if you're under the liberal Democrat umbrella and you're a minority in this country, you are either slated for death by abortion, death by an abortionist knife, and if you make it out of there, a life of squalor and destitution and hopelessness under the quote compassion of the quote great society. Okay, and in my first book, They Live, the subtitle is quote Great Society of the Undead, and I make the case in no uncertain terms that the word great is really a code name for the devil himself. And on past shows we've read that right out of Israel Regarde in his book called The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which is one of the cornerstones of the entire New Age movement. And in there, I read out of there that the chameleon, or their unknown god, or their dead god, Apollo or Osiris, or the beast who we're going to talk about here momentarily, a synonym, another synonym for that name is the synonym great. Okay, so the Great Plan, things like the Great Society, the Great War, World War One. What I started noticing was that word great kept popping up in regards to one world government, and in places where it really didn't belong. For example, World War One and the Great War. What's so great about a war? Okay, but when you find out it was nothing but a globalist-induced conflagration that absolutely did not have to happen, and especially did not have to involve the United States, and really was the setup for World War II, then things began to make sense and fall into place. Okay, so in other words, we're dealing with a bunch of mentally vapid, devil-worshipping psychopaths, okay, that run this nation, okay, mass murderers, genocidal maniacs, and outright psychopaths and devil worshippers, okay, and I'm not saying that, I mean those terms literally. Okay, and I'm not saying this, I'm not pulling punches, okay, I'm not saying this to be funny or cute. This is all fully documented, okay? So when David Rockefeller and the boys, for example, show up at Bohemian Grove and worship a 40-foot owl named Moloch, which is one and the same with the Baal, okay, to which people sacrifice children in the Old Testament, it's no different than sacrificing children to the environmental movement, the United Nations, and the population control, and the Mother Earth Gaia freaks at the United Nations with things like abortion and wars and disseminating the AIDS virus to poor people in Africa. Okay, so this is serious stuff. Okay, you're not going to hear about this on this crap that passes as Christianity on the Trinity Broadcasting Network. Okay, it's just not going to happen. Okay. So anyway, so that's the background. So let's move on here to Revelation 17. Okay, and we'll start. Might as well go back and start with the first two lines. Okay, and I'm just trying to cue that up here. Okay, and again, this is the Mystery Babylon link on my site, boxofsunglasses.com. Now, what's happened here, of course, you have the first 16 chapters of Revelation, which in a nutshell, I'm going to say are not meant to be taken literally. I mean, a lot of it's symbolic. A lot of it pertains to the war in heaven that's reflected down here in this four-dimensional scam we call reality. Okay, so if you go back, for example, to Colossians chapter 1, it calls Jesus himself the image of the invisible God and manifested in these end times. Okay, and if you go to the Lamb that opens up the seven seals, okay, obviously that's a symbolic of Jesus himself, and I believe that's Revelation chapter 6. But the seven seals span all of human history. Okay, so without going off into too much of a tangent, because I'm trying to focus this on this tie together of Revelation with current events right now, and then in future shows we can go back and start going through the first 16 chapters. I'm just trying to give you the overview. Is that, again, it's not meant to be taken, sequentially or literally. And I know a lot of people are going to have disagreements, and a lot of so-called Christians are not going to have a lot of nice things to say about me, which is fine. If I'm wrong, and I hope to be, then so be it. But for example, the two witnesses that are mentioned in Revelation chapter 11. There's so many people that say, well, after the Jewish temple is rebuilt, Moses and Elijah are going to come back to earth, and they're going to be in Jerusalem shooting people with flames, and then they have to be killed, and their bodies have to lie in the street for 3.5 days, and that's a literal event. That's a load of crap. Okay, that is absolutely not the two witnesses. Even in if you go back to Matthew chapter 17, for example, and even the apostles asked Jesus, why does the scripture say, Elijah must come back first? And Jesus goes through a whole thing and says, what they did to Elijah is what they're going to do to the Son of Man. And I'm paraphrasing here, but basically, and then it says, well, then the disciples realized that he was talking about John the Baptist. So John the Baptist was a form of Elijah reincarnated. So how can all these so-called biblical experts say Elijah is one of the two witnesses in Revelation chapter 11 when it's clear as day, clear to anybody that reads it? That's not the case at all. Okay, and that's just one example. And I've gone through many examples in the past where, again, the language of the Bible is either purely figurative, or if it's manifested or is true in a literal sense, then there's a much deeper and much bigger symbolic and figurative meaning behind that. Okay, and just for example, and again, I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but if you go back to John chapter 6, Jesus says, for you to have eternal life, you must eat my flesh and drink my blood. Now, of course, Jesus was not into cannibalism, and even many of the Jews and the Pharisees didn't understand, and saying, how can this man say, we're supposed to eat his flesh? But he was talking about it in a symbolic sense. Okay, we've discussed this several times, and Jesus talking about in Matthew 16, beware the leaven of the Pharisees, and the disciples thought he was talking about literal bread. He's talking about the doctrine. Okay, the doctrine of the Pharisees. Okay, which I believe really points right back to the Garden of Eden and the tree of knowledge of good and evil, where God's told Adam and Eve not to eat. It's not a literal tree. Wasn't fruit. Okay, what they were doing was an occult study of numbers and numerology. Okay, and I do not want to go off on that tangent right now, but the point is is that you have to change the mindset from these biblical literalists who don't know what the hell they're talking about. And I'm sure they'll have the same thing to say about me, and that's fine. But another example is the mark of the beast. I mean, look, you might have a physical manifestation of some kind of barcode or some kind of chip implant, at the very end of time, which we're coming up to here. But that's at the very end, okay? My response to those people is, okay, the mark of the beast is, 603 score and 6, which I said is symbolic of Robert Christian and the Rosicrucians, but they've been around for 2,000 years in the form of the Knights Templar and the Freemasons, etc., etc. So how can you focus on the very end of the mark of the beast, for example, and just ignore 2,000 years of history and build up to where we are right now? So you're telling me people that, David Rockefeller and his crew, and they worship Moloch at the Bohemian Grove, you're telling me they haven't, even if they don't have a chip implant, you're telling me they don't accept the mark of the beast? They worship the beast. They run the world. They run the banking system of the world. Okay, don't forget. Don't forget the symbol. Okay, there's your beast right there. Apollo or Osiris or Nimrod. Okay, Nimrod being the first president, so to speak, of the first world empire known as ancient Babylon. The Tower of Babel. Okay, you go back to Genesis chapter 11. Okay, there it is right there. That's the Great Seal. Okay, now this symbolism, just for example, has been around since 1913. Okay, put on the back of the dollar bill by the occultist Franklin Delano Roosevelt and his occult Secretary of Agriculture, Henry Wallace. Okay, covered extensively. Them and a shady character by the name of Nicholas Roerich, covered extensively in chapter 3 of this book. Okay, available for PDF download on my website. But there it is. Okay, so you're telling me that because they don't have some stupid microchip or whatever the mark of the beast, the physical mark of the beast is going to be at the very end, which is going to happen very quickly. You tell me they haven't accepted 666? I say to that, I say that's crap. Okay. All right. And again, the analogy I like to make is, you're trying to if you're going to sit here and focus everything on some microchip or something, and I'm not belittling this, okay? Just don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying these people are missing the big picture. It's like trying to describe a train, a 200-car freight train, and you focus on the caboose, okay? I'm not saying necessarily that they're wrong, okay? But I'm just saying they're missing the big picture. But with that, let's go into let's just pick it up here. Okay, this is verses 1 and 2 of chapter 17. And there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, okay, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with her fornication. Now, remember last show, we talked about the symbolism of a whore, okay, in the Old Testament, and in particular, I point you to Proverbs chapter 7, Ezekiel 16, Ezekiel 23, and the best description of Babylon, which kind of switches back and forth between ancient Babylon and a modern day Babylon, is Jeremiah, really 50 to 52. Okay, the last 3 chapters of Jeremiah is really the best description of this mystery Babylon. That's reflective of a lot of this language right here in verses 1 and 2 of chapter 17. Now, the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been drunk with her fornication. In other words, with her sexual infidelity, which is really a spiritual infidelity. Okay, it's not a literal infidelity. Okay, an entire nation isn't a whore. Okay, so you see, like the biblical literalists are in so much trouble already trying to interpret this stuff. I mean, how the hell do you? I can't even begin to contemplate how you would try to make that a literal kind of connection there. But obviously, what they're talking about a nation. Okay, so what nation? Who has really, what is the nexus of the New Age movement, and where does it manifest itself here in the United States? Okay, and a lot of this drunkenness or fornication is centered around, again, this thing. Okay, this Federal Reserve note. Okay, a lot of it is right here. Okay, in other words, we've been exporting debt and drunkenness and insanity to the world, and it's breaking out right now. The insanity of this debt-based system is manifesting itself right now. Okay, so in other words, the way to say this is that Dionysus, okay, was the Greek god of wine and revelry, and associated with the sun god, or, form of the sun god Pan, where we get the words panic and pandemonium or madness. Okay, Dionysus, the god of wine and revelry and insanity. Okay, is it basically is a cast off of this thing right here? Is a form of the sun god Baal or Osiris or Nimrod. Okay, so when we export our debt and our wars and our inflation, okay, along with the occult symbol on the back of the Federal Reserve note, that's what's coming into focus here. Okay, so in other words, this your Federal Reserve note is an occult symbol. Okay, it's the mark of the beast right there in front of you. Okay, so someone doesn't have to come in and stamp 666 on your forehead for you to have the beast right in your own wallet. Okay, and it's talking about the whore that sitteth upon many waters. Okay, now waters are, obviously there's United States is surrounded by oceans, and waters are symbolic of humanity as well. So there's a double meaning there. And of course, the kings of the earth have committed fornication. Everybody's gotten in on this debt-fueled insanity that the United States has exported with its sun god symbol and its Federal Reserve notes. Okay, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with her fornication. So in other words, you got Isis, okay, with her son/husband Dionysus or Pan or Osiris, spreading this madness, okay. And we're seeing the result of that right now. We're going to have a calamitous economic collapse of biblical proportions, and the nexus of it was right here, at the center point of this whole drunkenness or madness, again, is right here. Okay, where else is it? You're going to tell me that's Babylon, okay, which I'm not even sure, I know there might be a city on that, but which hasn't, in Iraq, okay, which hasn't functioned in 2,000 years, can fit the bill. Okay, even the Roman Catholic Church, which is I believe a good candidate for Mystery Babylon, but still falls short of the United States. It subserves the United Nations and the United States, the Roman Catholic Church. People like to say, it's the richest, one of the richest entities in the world, but obviously, look, it's not the Federal Reserve System, okay. But considering the actions of the demon Pope and the obelisk in St. Peter's Square, okay, the obelisk, which is another symbol, which is basically, equates to this without going off on that tangent again. It's basically the number 14 part of Osiris, or the phallus of Osiris, which he uses to copulate into his whore wife / mother / sister Isis. And we get this again, this spiritual fornication. So let's move on. Now again, the word seven, I go through the whole thing with the meaning of the word seven, and I want to rehash that right now, but you go back to the link to 322 of the Georgia Guidestones of the Echo Wackos, and that's a link that's kind of a summary information on the environmental movement, Skull and Bones 322, and the genocidal maniacs in the radical environmental movement. That's also, again, fully covered and fully documented here. Okay. Another way to look at this, the un-American genocidal complex of the Eastern Establishment, or Skull and Bones, or the Bilderbergs, whatever you want to call it. Okay, that's the nexus. Okay, that's your beast in a sense. Okay, So now we're going to go skip down to verses 3 to 5. So he carried me away in spirit into the wilderness. Now, of course, the wilderness is indicative of ancient Egypt, okay, which in a New Testament sense is really the whole world. The whole world is considered Egypt. You know, if you go back to Matthew chapter 2, it says, you know, pertaining to Jesus, which, again, you know, Jesus is a picture of the entire Christian church or the Christian world. It says, I have called my son again out of Egypt. Okay, and of course he was physically in Egypt at the time, you know, to escape Herod, who was killing everybody because he didn't want any competition. You know, King Herod, you know, God's chosen people, didn't want any competition from God himself, you know, to be the king. So Herod went around and killed everybody under 2 years old, and Jesus went down to Egypt, and, you know, out of Egypt I've called my son. Now, of course, there's baby Jesus coming out of the nation of Egypt, but of course, the much bigger picture, again, is the entire world has become Egypt or the wilderness, okay? You know, again, the entire world is under the control of this thing, all right? Or they're trying to control the world, but as we'll see later on in Revelation 17 and 18, it's not working out too good. And this is reflected in current events, okay? As China and Russia start to kind of resist the New World Order, the Rockefeller, Rothschild, demon, ancient Egyptian world order that they're trying to establish. But anyway, so he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-covered beast full of names and blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, and full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Okay. Now John, the Revelator, decided to put all this whole, what I just read, the Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. That's in all caps. Now, what is that? Obviously, that alludes to this female whore goddess of the ancient Egyptians known as Isis. Okay, now in Babylon and Samaria, I think she was known as Babylon as Ishtar. Okay, in Samaria, Inanna. Okay, and if you run over to the Greeks, okay, she was known as Diana or Artemis. Okay, or the Greek Artemis, the Roman Diana. Okay, Juno, Luna. Okay, Columbia. Okay, was another goddess. Okay, Roman goddess, or Liberty or Libertas. Okay, so when you hear the words Columbia associated with Obama, for instance, you know, he supposedly went to Columbia University, except there's no record of him going there. Okay, you remember, you know, that's another tangent I'm going to go off with, but it's symbolic of the female whore goddess. So Pharaoh Barry, okay, is a product of Occidental. He supposedly went to Occidental College. There's no record of him being there. There might be a photo or something posted, so, you know, sitting in some room smoking some weed next to some losers. Oh, this is Obama at Occidental University. But as usual, there's no proof that he went to Occidental. Remember, Occident is symbolic of the rose, or the west, or the setting sun, whereas Columbia in the east is symbolic of the rising sun. Now you put these two together, Isis and Osiris, and what do you get? You know, you get Horus, okay, the son of the whore goddess, or the mother of harlots and abominations, okay. And what I'm trying to do here is tie these two together, is, you know, making the case of going to Revelation 17 and 18, making the case that there's no other nation today or in the history of the world that fits the bill better than these very United States, or this corporation, this Federal Reserve Corporation called the United States, which isn't my country. But anyway, so again, Columbia, Luna, Artemis, Diana, Isis, Ishtar, the female, the mother of harlots. Okay, Osiris, Occidental. Okay, the rose, symbol of secrecy. Okay, the male. Okay, so the rose plus the cross, and their son Horus, little Pharaoh Barry. And remember, we just made the connection between the wilderness and Egypt, and what's happening today in the United States. And hopefully I'm doing an adequate job of making this clear enough for people to follow. But anyway, so there we are. So now, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. So in other words, this is the entire earth. Okay, so, again, this male-female principle is reflected in every mythology and every religion throughout the world. And, even in India, you have the male god Vishnu and Brahma, the male god of destruction known as Shiva, destruction/creation, which is an aside I found very interesting. And it equates to the, in a lot of ways to the Greek and Roman gods Pan and Dionysus. So we just, the god of revelry and wine and insanity, okay, and partying, but has a lot of, reflections in the Indian god Shiva, who is a god of destruction. Okay, remember, order out of chaos. Okay, these psychopaths running the world want to suck the world into a economic collapse/nuclear war, and then out of that destruction have a new creation. Okay, indicative of the the Indian god Shiva, and of course the female equivalent to Isis over in India was a female goddess by the name of Kali. Okay, again, and she had both good and bad manifested in her. Okay, and maybe if you watch Ancient Aliens, those imbeciles on Ancient Aliens on the History Channel, they'll sit there and they'll deny the God and the creator of the universe, and just like with the evolutionists, come up with every excuse not to believe in the God of the Bible, and come up with some other idiotic explanation for the genesis, no pun intended, of mankind, some kind of alien race or some superior technology. They'll ignore the plain language of the Old Testament, and they have been ignoring it. Okay, that's all part of the great coming great deception, talked about in 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, okay, or chapter 2, excuse me. Okay, the son of perdition. Okay, but anyway, so there you have it. Your Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Again, things like the United Nations. We're talking about the entire earth here. Okay, no other nation, and New York City in particular, fits this description. Okay, nothing else fits here, especially from a nation that started out under Christian principles. Okay, that's Christian principles to a nation where we pay $160 to have rip a baby's face off and take its brains for $160. Okay, so hopefully that kind of brings things back to reality. Okay, and meanwhile we go start wars everywhere in Syria and Russia, for countries that degrade human rights, or the war on terror, or whatever. Assad, weapons of mass destruction, or Assad used chemical weapons on his own people. Even if that was true, which it wasn't, who the hell are we? Okay. We rip a baby's face off and sell its brains for $160. Okay, and we're gonna go butt into other countries' business because of weapons of mass destruction, which was a lie to begin with. Okay. Now, things are going to start to get interesting. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of saints and with the blood of martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. Okay, again, you have this concept of drunken and drunkenness and revelry. Okay, and the woman, okay, this is reflecting a lot of these ancient cults, okay, with a lot of which are still around, these New Age witches, covens, and this sort of thing, okay, trying to mimic this sort of thing, Okay, but drunken with the blood of saints. So obviously that means killing believers, followers of Jesus. Okay, which is another reason I can't stand these people that focus on, what's happening now and rapture, and what about the last 2,000 years? What about all the Christians that were getting literally burned alive and fed to lions in the Roman Empire, or took on the my number two candidate for the whore of Babylon, the Catholic Church? Okay, trying to resist the Catholic Church and its tyranny and its evil. Okay, and what it was doing. And its Pope and its thuggery and corruption, stealing gold from people, and telling people they had to contribute gold to the Catholic Church, or they or their relatives were going to burn in hell. Okay, I'm talking about groups like the Lollards and the Huguenots and the William Tyndales, okay, and the John Wycliffes and people like this, real Christians who resisted the Catholic Church and were tortured and burned at the stake. Okay, that's what this language is referring to here. Okay, this has been going on for 2,000 years and continues to go on today. It hasn't hit the United States yet, because most cotton candy Christians are sitting in the pews of these mega churches, thinking they're going to get raptured out of here as soon as the heat is on and the persecution starts. They're going to get magic, because they sit and listen to some imbecile lie to them about how Israel is God's chosen people. They're somehow going to magically miss all this. It ain't going to happen like that. Okay. And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns. Okay, let's just stop right there. Now, obviously, so this woman is riding the beast, which means she kind of controls it. Okay, but keep that in mind. That doesn't mean the beast likes the whore. Okay, and that's kind of where this is going. Just to give a little preview, the beast hates the whore and burns her with fire. Okay, which I'm interpreting as a large-scale nuclear ambush of the whore. If the whore's the United States, that means we got some big problems here coming up. Okay, but I don't want to jump ahead right now. But wherefore did thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. They that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. Now, this beast is obviously referring to a conglomeration of world powers. Okay, not just in a snapshot of time, but in all time. Okay, over all of time, going back to the Garden of Eden. Okay, is what's in focus here. So, the beast that was and is not and yet is I believe a take on Nimrod. Okay, now remember, Apollo and Osiris and Nimrod are basically equivalent. Nimrod was the first king of the earth. Apollo, Osiris, Nimrod. Okay, was the first king of the earth. Okay, now so he was. Okay, now remember the Tower of Babel, that was all broken up. God, dispersed the people. They started speaking in different languages and dispersed them all over the world. Okay, this is right after the Great Flood. And then, so that was now the time of John the Revelator. The beast is not in existence. There is no real one world government at that time. Now, yet is. Then that means this beast will be coming back. And if you go to Revelation chapter 9, remember the bottomless pit is opened up, and this god of the bottomless pit is known as Apollo or Apollyon. Apollo, Osiris, Nimrod. Okay, so the connection is obviously there. Now Apollyon, now you got Apollo and you got On. Now the On is a definite direct arrow or pointing to Orion. or Osiris, okay, or now if you or Orion the mighty hunter, which is another name for Nimrod, okay, or remember the Great Pyramid of Giza. It's a pyramid complex, okay, or in direct alignment with the belt of Orion, okay. Now again, the ancient alien people will tell you, well, this is some kind of ancient alien race, and they controlled, they provided the technology, and I'm saying no, these are biblical fallen angels and demons that gave the ancients this knowledge, okay, and our sellout criminal overlords, just like the high priest of ancient Egypt and their Pharaoh Barry, okay, the equivalent, have sold out to these higher powers, these demonic powers, and they've gone as far as to put them on the Federal Reserve note. Honor the god of forces, or Apollo or Apollyon, with the picture of him right on the Federal Reserve note. So it's right in our faces. And again, it's right here. Okay, remember, this is St. John's Divine Cathedral right here in Mystery Babylon. Okay, and I don't want to go off on that tangent. I can spend several shows on this building alone. Okay. But there it is. Okay, built by J.P. Morgan, who was one of the main people that gave us this. J.P. Morgan allied with the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. Okay, one of the scumbags, the lowlifes who gave us Woodrow Wilson, the progressive Woodrow Wilson, the American eugenics movement, and the, quote, Great War, which we talked about before, the word great. We covered that briefly. Okay, so I'm bouncing back and forth between, say, current events and, say, current events in world history of, say, the last 100 years, and this the line-by-line breakdown to make the connections and try to bring these, kind of lasso these two together. That is current events and the book of Revelation. All right. So, the beast that thou sowest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. So again, the beast that was and is not and yet is. So I don't necessarily want to go off on too much of a tangent right now, but just be aware that this beast, okay, and I'm to be perfectly blunt and honest, I'm still kind of researching this on how exactly this will manifest itself. And I know the answers in the Bible, and I have some ideas, but I don't necessarily want to go off on those right now. But this is Apollo or Osiris or Nimrod. And what I'm saying is that this was a physical being on this earth, was dead and buried, and will be resurrected in some fashion, whether that's some kind of DNA genetic manipulation or whatever. I'm not sure about, but that's what this language is saying, and the world will worship this beast. And just as an aside, okay, Revelation 13, it talks about two beasts. Okay, you have the beast, which is obviously Satan, okay, the beast whose deadly head wound was healed. But then you have this other beast, okay, which comes out of the bottomless pit, okay, two separate entities, okay. So, I just go through the whole thing with, what I just talked about with the martyrs and all this other sort of thing, and going back to, New Atlantis. Okay, the United States is another piece of the puzzle there. Okay, the United States was called New Atlantis by people like Francis Bacon, okay, and a lot of the people that founded the Virginia colony and this sort of thing, okay, European and especially English elitists and the Rosicrucian group, okay, the Royal Society and these sorts of people called the United States New Atlantis. Now, of course, you had that going on, mostly centered around the Virginia colony down south, but then you had the Pilgrims and the Puritans, really devout Christians who were trying to legitimately escape persecution over in Europe, with the Anglican and the Catholic Church, which they disagreed with. Okay, and they were looking for a new start, and they found it in this new world known as the United States. So you can kind of see this God versus Satan setup, really, if you go back in this nation's early founding. And I know there's a lot of people that sit here and say the United States is part of the conspiracy, and and the Jacobites, and Francis Bacon, came to the Virginia colony, and but I don't know, go on a tangent right now, but I say to that's to me is that's a lot of crap too, because the New World Order crowd has spent a lot of time and effort to dissuade people and to denigrate this nation formerly known as the United States, okay, and its constitutional form of trying to run into technical issues here again, so I'll try and wrap this up here. But anyway, so I'm saying this nation was founded as a Christian nation, albeit imperfect, and that foundation has been ripped and torn away in the last 100 years thanks to the Federal Reserve System and its tax-exempt foundations and its funding of these Ivy League schools and these Keynesian economic maniacs, okay, these idiots, these Paul Krugmans and these types of Larry Summers and the Goldman Sachs criminals and the Harvard Business School scumbags, okay, who will come out and say, well, you have to go into debt to get out of debt, and these Fabian socialists, okay, who are doing nothing more than making a lot of money for the owners of the banks, who are the disseminators of debt. Remember Proverbs 22:7, the debtor is slave to the lender. Okay, so in a sense, just like the Israelites were slaves in ancient Egypt, Proverbs 22:7, the debtor is slave to the lender. Okay, the United States is now the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. And in fact, the entire nation to an entire world, is or has been in debt to these criminals. Now, this plan is starting to go haywire a little bit, currently right now with Russia and China and these so-called BRICS nations taking on this new world order. We're approaching a point of absolute mayhem, is where this is all going, or helter-skelter, whatever you want to call it. But that's the point, okay? So again, this is another parallel, okay? So you have this pyramid system of the Federal Reserves, a slave system just like in Egypt, okay? So the parallels are there, as I said at the beginning. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth, and there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. Okay, so this is talking about a worldwide system. Okay, you have these 7 heads of 7 mountains. Okay, now I believe, again, remember, this isn't necessarily solely focused on one time frame or one instance in time. I'm saying that these, I'm making these, this is my interpretation of these 5 heads, okay, the 5 major kingdoms of the ancient world. Okay, you have Babylon. Okay, you had the ancient Babylon / Sumeria, which was really the cradle of civilization, the first known civilization. Okay, kind of, it's another endless just criticisms, okay, or negatives for the evolution crowd. Okay, you had a relatively sudden explosion of organized civilization known as Sumeria, which basically morphed into Babylon. Okay, then you had Babylon under Nimrod, who we talked about, and then Hammurabi and these kinds of people. Okay, the first organized society. Okay, then you had the revived Babylonian Empire, which was raised to specifically under Nebuchadnezzar to take out ancient Israel. Okay, for all its spiritual fortifications and its whoredoms discussed in the Old Testament, which we went into briefly on the last episode. But anyway, so I'm saying number 1 of these 5 kings that are fallen, you had ancient Babylon, you had Egypt. Okay, Egypt was a very powerful empire for a time. It ebbed and flowed. Okay, you had an old kingdom, a middle kingdom, and a new kingdom. Okay, but Egypt was a very powerful old world empire. Okay, the Assyrian Empire was another worldwide, very powerful empire. Okay, capital Nineveh. Okay, again, which was came out of the Babylonian Empire. You had the Media Persian Empire under King Darius and his successors. Okay, which kind of took over the revived the Babylonian Empire. Okay, and then you have Greece. Okay, under Alexander, which kind of overtook the Media Persian Empire. Okay, now of course there were other empires, kind of interspersed throughout there, and little kingdoms here and there. The Philistines, the Canaanites, okay, the Hittites. Okay, so there were other, but these are, from my perspective, and I don't attest to myself have any kind of doctorate in history. This is my own research, but these are the five most powerful kingdoms of the old world. Okay. And then the one is, so obviously what John was writing this was Rome, okay, and the other is not yet come, is a future world empire, okay, and that's what we're looking at right now. Now this new empire is not going to last too long. It's going to be very quick as a matter, but it is going to be very powerful, okay. So here I say it's kind of an offshoot of the New World is the British Empire. Okay, but there was a saying the British, the sun never sets on the British Empire. So the British Empire was powerful for a time. But when I say the British Empire, I mean what came out of the British Empire but the American Empire. Okay, so the British Empire, when we say European, you said British, the lion. Okay, and we'll get to the, if you remember the beast, in Daniel and Revelation. Okay, one of the mouth of a lion. Okay, that's the British Empire. The British, the subset of the British Empire, of course, is the American Empire. Okay, you had the Rothschild London Banking Center, which basically fed the Rockefeller, Morgan, Federal Reserve banking centers here in the United States in the 1800s. Okay, so that is really, now you can kind of see the formation of this last beast, okay, as these nations try to conquer the world through the banking system, okay. So those are those kingdoms there. So that's Revelation 9 through 13, okay, and I'm over my self-appointed hour here. So let's just jump to Revelation 17:14, and now it says, "These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, and for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called chosen and faithful." Okay. So, excuse me, what I didn't mention was the 10 kings. Okay, now the 10 kings, okay, now I'm not saying 10 is not a literal number. A lot of people say, well, this is a 10-nation European empire, this is 10 nations in Europe, or we keep looking for some kind of 10-nation confederacy, but I don't believe that's a literal. I think 10 is a biblical number that symbolizes fullness. Okay, so to me, those 10 kings represent all the kingdoms of the world, or other smaller nations throughout the world, who will join up with the beast. Okay, this beast system. Okay, when the time comes, okay, they give their power and strength unto the beast. So they're going to be part of it. In other words, it's going to be a worldwide system between this conglomeration of these 7 world empires, okay, and these 10 kings. Okay, now the 10 kings, again, are 10 minor nations. So the point is it's a one world system. Okay. Now it says down here that it says these, okay, the 10 kings and this beast system shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. Now I believe here, and I think John, this is kind of an aside, or this should be put in parentheses. To me, this is pointing to the Battle of Armageddon. Okay, that's going to happen after this great whore of Babylon is taken out of the picture. So, in other words, what I'm saying, and I'll conclude with this, and we'll pick this back up in verses 15 to 18 on Thursday. What I'm saying is that there will be a battle of Armageddon, and these nations will try to take Israel. Okay, just like the Knights Templar, we spent a lot of time in Israel, and Israel, Jerusalem is rife with some kind of secret or ancient knowledge that whatever it was, the Knights Templar took that knowledge and and of course came back to Europe and started building cathedrals all over the place and became the world's first international bankers, gave rise to the British Royal Society, the Rosicrucians. That circles back to the Rothschild, Rockefeller, Carnegie, J.P. Morgan crowd. Okay. So what I'm saying is that, again, this eventually all ties together. Okay. But the point I was trying to make there was that Jerusalem is home, Solomon's temple is home to some very deep secrets, okay, that again the Knights Templar used to build their cathedrals, and this was the genesis again of the modern day Freemasons, okay, the Masons, stone builders, okay, building the cathedrals all over Europe, and St. John's right here in that I just showed you on the front cover of my first book, They Live. So there's going to be some kind of push after this great whore the United States is taken out of the picture. Okay, so things are starting to come into focus, okay, and they're starting to reflect current events. In other words, not to jump ahead, but the overall, again, the panoramic or the Cliff Notes version, and we'll go into this more deeply on the next show. Let's conclude with this: is that we're going to have a calamitous economic collapse, okay, and a very short-lived peace treaty. Okay, kind of a fake peace treaty, kind of like a setup, kind of like a peace treaty amongst serpents. Okay, leaders of all these evil nations in the world. But the beast, okay, the world will be united in its hatred of the great whore. Okay, and the great whore being the United States, and we are seeing this right now shaping up. Okay, China, Russia, many countries in Europe now, the Middle East. Okay, they're sick of the United States and its hypocrisy and its warmongering and its debt and its Federal Reserve scam artists. Okay, and the United States arrogance and and its drone strikes and its illegal wars. So the beast, the whore, is riding the beast. It's kind of controlling it, but then the beast at the same time hates the whore. And that's the language we're going to get into, and that's, again, it's directly reflected in current events. Okay. Now notice where in this, and I'll just conclude with this. Now where in this, where have I said anything about a 7-year tribulation or a pre-tribulation rapture? The Cartoon Network Christians sitting in their pews, listening to these clowns on the Trinity Broadcasting Network and giving their life savings to national Israel because they think they're God's chosen people. Where is any of that nonsense? It's not here, okay? A rebuilt Jerusalem temple. It's just not happening. It's not going to happen. All right? It can happen without starting World War III. Okay, there's no time for it to happen. It would take years and years. We don't have years and years, okay? The economy of this country and the world is about to collapse, okay? The buildup, the drum roll, the drum beats for World War III are happening now, okay, with these psychopaths and their push for war in the Middle East. Okay, everything's not going to stop so some Jewish rabbis can rebuild some ridiculous stone temple on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. You're not going to hear it on this show because that's not the way it goes down. All right? And I'll conclude with this. Remember, God's Simple Salvation Plan on the homepage of my site is probably the most important takeoff from this. Isaiah chapter 40, the nations of the world are grass. Okay, James chapter 4, our life is nothing but a vapor trail. Okay. Psalm 2, God will laugh at our calamity. Okay, the King of the universe. That's what I'm getting at is, a lot of this, from a different perspective, as important, as big a deal as it is from this side of heaven, from God's side, it's not really that big a deal. All right. So the King of the universe is in control of this whole mess, and the way to get on the right side of this is God's simple salvation plan, and it really is simple. And I spell that out, and there's a link to it on my site. Again, that's boxofsunglasses.com. And so we'll pick this up on Thursday. We'll conclude with Revelation 17 and get into Revelation 18, which is where things really get interesting. Again, Rob Roselli, boxofsunglasses.com. Good night and God bless.